Dear students, we are in the seventh part of the wrist and hand complex. So, one would expect extension of the hand to be accompanied by sliding of the convex proximal carpal surface volarly, that is anteriorly, in a direction opposite to the hand motion. While there is an extension happening on the anterior side, what will happen? The sliding of the convex proximal carpal row will happen. So that means it is happening in the opposite to the hand motion. The hand is moving upward, but here in the volarly, they are the proximal carpal row, the convexly sliding downward, which is happening. Radial or ulnar deviation of the. So now we completed. You have understood. I hope you have understood about the biomechanics of flexion and extension of the wrist joint. Now we are into the radial and ulnar deviation of the wrist. Radial and ulnar deviation of the wrist seems to be an even more complex. So they are saying, the authors are saying that radial and ulnar deviation are more complex biomechanics than the flexion extension, but perhaps less varied motion than flexion extension. It is more complex but less varied. That's what they are saying. The proximal carpal row displays a unique reciprocal motion with radial and ulnar deviation. So the proximal carpal row is displaying, they are expressing, they are showing a reciprocal motion. Reciprocal means equally opposite motion. Both when it happens, what is happening? Radial deviation happens and ulnar deviation. There is a reciprocal motion of the proximal carpal row. In radial deviation, the carpal slide. In radial deviation, the carpal slide ulnarly on the radius. So that means when somebody does radial deviation, the carpals will be sliding towards middle side. That is they call it as ulnarly. They are moving towards ulna, and they are, where are they gliding? They are gliding on the radius, because we know that the joint is called as radiocarpal. There is no anatomical or attachment biomechanical. We don't give importance to the ulna in the radiocarpal joint, that is the wrist joint. So in radial deviation, the carpal slide ulnarly on the radius. The carpal motion not only produces deviation of the proximal and distal carpals radially, so opposite happens during the, what happens? The ulnar deviation should happen. The carpals not only produce deviation of the proximal and distal carpals radially, but simultaneously flexion of the proximal carpals and extension of the distal carpals. So when this happens, what happens? Also there is a flexion of the proximal carpals and extension of the distal carpals. The opposite motions of the proximal and distal carpals occur with ulnar deviation. So with ulnar deviation, what is happening is opposite motions of the proximal and distal carpal bones occur. So the proximal carpals are going for flexion. Then what will happen for the distal? They will go for extension. So this is happening in ulnar deviation. So radial deviation, their reciprocal movements are happening. Exactly opposite movements are happening. During radial bar ulnar deviation, both in radial and ulnar deviation, the distal carpals once again move as a relatively fixed unit, although the magnitude of the motion between the bones of the proximal carpal row may vary differently. But there may be, even though they are reciprocally moving, their movements are, there is mild degree of variation in the movements. So in full radial deviation, see here you can see what is happening here. This is the radius, right? So this is the radius and this is the ulna. So here you can see that the uh, the first metacarpal bone, that is, you can see on this side, and then they are moving towards, here you can see that this is towards the radial side. it is moving towards the radial side. You cannot see the first metacarpal. So here you can see the first metacarpal because is in the ulnar deviation. The metacarpal is moving towards the ulna. The fifth metacarpal has moved towards the ulna. Here the fifth metacarpal has moved away from the ulna, means the first metacarpal may move towards the radius. So this is called as radial deviation, and this is the ulnar deviation. Now in the radial deviation, see what is happening when the wrist goes to radial deviation. The scaphoid is twisting like this. See, the scaphoid is, so just see here what is scaphoid doing. Scaphoid is present like this. But here this bone, which is the bone, this is a trapezium trapezoid, two bones. These bones which are actually vertically present in the ulnar deviation. If you see the radius and the first metacarpal, the trapezium trapezoid, the distal carpal bones are vertically jam packed between the metacarpals and then in the vertical line. But here if you see this is a radius, and here the trapezium trapezoid sliding over the scaphoid and reaching to the almost to the edge of the radius. How large a movement is this? See the movement here. Here compare it. And here also see the lunate which is present onto the radius, and but half of the lunate is popping outside, but it is not gliding on the ulna, because you know what is there, the whole soft tissue structure is there, and then the triangular fibrocartilage, it is moving on the triangular fibrocartilage complex. So here you can see that in ulnar deviation the lunate is totally gone inside, and they are going into and pushing the scaphoid laterally. See the capitate here. Capitate is what we call as a keystone. So here the capitate is moving towards the radial side in radial deviation. In ulnar deviation, the capitate is moving towards the which side? Towards the ulnar side. And also you can see the capitate. Then you have, which bone do you have after capitate? Hamate. So it is pushing on the hamate, and then the hamate is coming up above the lunate bone also, you can see now. So in full radial deviation, both the radiocarpal and the midcarpal joints are in closed back position. The ranges of wrist complex radial and ulnar deviation are greatest when the wrist is in neutral flexion bar extension. So that means that the ranges of the wrist complex radial and ulnar are greatest when the wrist is in neutral. That means if you put the wrist into flexion and try to do, now you try, all of you try to put your wrist into flexion and try to do radial division and ulnar division, you will not get. What you will get is for the supination and pronation. So, and you try the same way, put your wrist in extension and try to do ulnar and radial division, you will get, but mild only. But put it into neutral position and try. Now you can move the wrist joint into very well more 45 degrees of ulnar deviation, and lesser degrees, or maybe 25 to 30 degrees of radial deviation is possible. So that is what we are saying. Because if you are not getting a closed pack, if the carpal bones are not going into a closed pack position, one cannot get radial and ulnar deviation. That is why, while we studied in the earlier part, the neutral position of the wrist joint, that is what long axis of the third metacarpal in line with the long axis of the forearm, that is the neutral position. In that position only we are able to do, we will achieve good ulnar and radial deviation, because only then in the neutral only the carpal bones are in close pack position. I hope you started to understand the importance of biomechanics. So these things are very, very important. We will gain the knowledge that how the bones are moving inside, or so this will help you a lot. If you study I know it is very hard to study, but if you study it well, later on in your life you will be very, very easy to treat your patients. You know what is happening exactly inside their hand. So that is this knowledge is very essential. Okay, the ranges of wrist complex radial and ulnar deviation are greatest when the wrist is in neutral flexion bar extension. Already said that, repeating that. When the wrist is extended and is in close back position, the carpals are all locked and very little radial or ulnar deviation is possible. Because in the earlier part we studied that in the final part we know that the carpal bone, the final extension, we know that the carpal bones will move like a single unit on where on the radius where which on radius and the TFCC. So there also there is close back position, but there is a problem. The close back position of the carpal is too strong, or it is too extreme, that there will be no very any movement possible for the ulnar or radial deviation. That's why you may have this idea in mind, because sir told in the last part that the wrist joint is close back position, the carpal bones are going in close back position even in the extensor position, final extension range. But the problem is that in that extension there is no possibility of movement of radial and ulnar deviation, because the close back position is too tight. Okay, in wrist flexion the joints are loose packed and the bones are splayed. Same in the flexion we cannot do ulnar deviation, radial deviation, because it is totally loose packed. The carpal bones are loose packed, no, the bones are splayed, so there is no possibility of ulnar and radial deviation. In extensor extreme extension also, the because it is totally close packed, too much close packed position, there is no possibility of movement. The only good movement is possible in neutral rest. Don't forget this ever. The radial and ulnar deviation is only possible, a very good, in a way, good way is possible only in neutral position of the wrist. So we will go through just to understand what will happen if this already we have discussed. If this not happening in the biomechanical way, wrist instability will happen. So wrist instability, how does it happen? The flexed distal carpals, the flexed distal carpals glide dorsally on the lunate. The flexed distal carpals glide dorsally on the lunate and tricutum, accentuating accentuating the extension of the lunate and tricutum. The flexed distal carpals, which are the flexed distal carpal? Importantly, trapezium, trapezoid, capitate, and hamate. So they are gliding dorsally, posteriorly, on which proximal carpal bones? We don't have scaphoid here. We are talking about lunate and tricutrium. Accentuating, what are they trying to accentuate? Means increase, to try to increase the extension of the lunate and tricutrium. This zigzag pattern of the three segments, the scaphoid, the lunate tricutum, and the distal carpal row, is known as the intercalated segment instability. We already studied about the intercalated segment. So if this normal pattern is not happening, and the zigzag pattern of three segments, the three segments means one is the scaphoid, next is the lunate and tricutum, and the third is the distal carpal row. If they act as a different in a different way, and the collapsing, then it is called as intercalated segments. We earlier studied about stability of intercalated segment. Now it will what will happen? There is instability may happen. So zigzag pattern of the three segments. So which segments are there? One is scaphoid, the second is the lunate tricutum, third is the distal carpal row. When the lunate assumes an extended posture, the presentation is referred to as dorsal intercalated segment instability. So if this happens in the extended posture, that means it is because its extension happens, we are looking at the posterior part of the wrist. So it is called as DSI, which is dorsal intercalated segmental instability. And other one is called as the SLAC wrist, the progressive degeneration problem from an untreated DSI. If a DSI is happening to somebody, you may have some people you have seen after a mild fall or accident, they may have this. So this continue on without any proper physiotherapy or any treatment, orthopedic treatment. They will what they will have? They will have progressive degeneration problem from an untreated DSI known as scapholunate advanced collapse, SLAC, wrist. What is collapse?